Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Glad to be with you here today. And I have a slight cold, so I'm going to apologize in advance for any coughing I subject you to. But I'm very excited to be talking with you about mixed methods research designs today. And this is taken from Plano Clark and Creswell, Chapter 12. Now, on the first slide, I've put an image that's actually from the Mixed Methods International Research Association site. And what I've tried to do is throughout these presentations is to pull images from places where you could get follow-up information. And so, yeah, that's one place you might want to check out. Okay, so let's jump in. Slide 2. How do you identify that a study used mixed methods research? Okay, you'll be looking for key terms. Usually it's pretty clearly stated in the abstract or the title or the purpose statement or the beginning of the methods section. And you'll be looking for terms like mixed methods or multi-method or mixed methodology, or we integrated and combined qualitative and quantitative methods, or other, terms that are letting you know that they use both quantitative and qualitative. Now, another way I've used is if you look at the results section, if there are graphs and quotes, sometimes that's a pretty good clue that it's a mixed methods study. Okay, so what makes a study mixed methods? Basically, we have both quantitative and qualitative data, right? And we have two types of analyses. So we'll have some kind of statistical analyses. And remember, quantitative data is really good for answering questions of what and how many and how often and how high or how severe. And qualitative data is really good for answering process questions like about how something happens and causality questions, why something happens. And then some way of combining what is learned from both the quantitative and qualitative components. Now, as researchers, when should we use mixed methods research? Maybe you need to combine the strengths of both. You need to establish kind of the what, the how often, how many, but you also want to explain why, for example. In this way, you can get a more complete picture of a social phenomenon. So, because you're getting kind of like trends overall from a population as well as individual experiences. Now, sometimes you need to build from one type of data or another. We're going to talk a little bit about that when we talk about some mixed methods designs. And sometimes you have two different but related questions. And so it might be your first question is establishing that the phenomenon exists, and your second question might be, if this phenomenon exists, why does it exist? Or if this process is actually happening, how is it happening? Okay. Now, there are different mixed methods designs, and we're going to talk about 4.5 ones today. The timing, it was the data collected, both the quantitative and qualitative parts of the study collected at the same time, or did one follow the other? So concurrent or sequential. The priority, whether the data has equal priority, and then how the mixing happened. What's the relationship between the first data set that was used and the second data set? Okay, so 4 common mixed methods research designs. Convergent parallel design, and you can think of that as the quantitative and qualitative are in parallel going along a track. sequential explanatory design, and that is dominated by the quantitative component. Sequential exploratory design is dominated by the qualitative component, and then embedded design, and that's where one thing is embedded in the other. And then finally, we're going to talk about transformative design as well, because this is something that's very important to those of us in the professions, and we are trying to, affect some kind of improvement. Okay, there are other, on table 12.1, there are other types of mixed methods research designs listed. Okay, convergent parallel designs. It could be about, they may have done quantitative and qualitative analyses because they want to see the phenomena from two different perspectives. That's triangulation, right? Other terms, concurrent or simultaneous. And the research problem calls for the strengths both from a quantitative and qualitative perspective, and for those strengths to be combined so that the researcher can describe both generalizations and trends along with individual perspectives and contexts. Now, I will say, in my experience, true convergent parallel designs are rare. And the reason is what we talked about when we first started talking about qualitative research. Quantitative research is coming from a post-positivist perspective, and qualitative research is coming from an interpretive perspective, right? And so there are really two different worldviews at play. In one worldview, there is a universal truth that you can find out, right? That positivist perspective or post-positivist perspective. And in the other, social phenomena can only be interpreted from the perspective of the participants, right? So when you have two different worldviews, the chances are there's one that is going to be emphasized over the other. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so next slide. And this is slide 8. The characteristics of convergent parallel designs. The quantitative and qualitative data are collected concurrently, or they're collected in the same phase of the research process. The quantitative and qualitative components have equal priority for addressing the question. And again, this is rare. And then there's some way of merging or comparing or synthesizing the two sets of separate results to make an overall interpretation about the phenomenon, and also about the extent to which one set of results complements or extends or confirms the other set. So people use convergent parallel mixed methods design when they have a way of thoughtfully combining the strengths of both quantitative and qualitative research. And then, the strengths can offset the weaknesses of the other, right? You get more valid results when you can corroborate from a couple of different perspectives. The global perspective corroborates the individual perspective and vice versa. And then also, it's really good if you have certain things that are inconsistent, like on the survey, folks said this, but when interviewed, they said that. When the two data sources do not agree, this is one way that you can tease apart what's going on. Okay, let's talk about sequential explanatory designs. Explanatory, two-phase, that kind of data, that kind of thing. And the main thing is the quantitative data is collected and analyzed first. So you're getting the quantitative results and then you're explaining it with the qualitative results. Again, so the characteristics, and now I'm on slide 11, the characteristics are, in terms of timing, the quantitative data is collected first, followed by the qualitative data. The quantitative data takes the priority, and there's a way that the quantitative phase built to the qualitative question or phase, right? So this led, the quantitative led you to the qualitative somehow. Some rationales, slide 12. Maybe you need maybe you got some initial information from your quantitative piece, but you want to go deeper. The quantitative piece alone was inadequate. And often this happens because our statistical results are not fully explained, right? So we printed the graph, we can see the trend, but we don't know why that trend exists. And finally, sometimes it is used for participant selection, particularly when you're trying to find participants that have certain characteristics. So if I'm doing a study of depression in teenagers, let's say, well, I have to find out, first of all, who is depressed. So I might give some kind of inventory, Beck's depression inventory, let's say, to a group of kids, and then I might pick out those who meet the definition of being depressed, and hopefully the study, there's a therapeutic component to the project as well. But this is what we need to find a certain population. We're going to use the quantitative part to find that group. Okay. So let's look at an example. So there was a policy initiative called Reading First that some of you may remember, and classes, and it was rolled out across the country, and this was during the second Bush era, and so they were looking at elementary reading, and that's what Reading First was. It was basically a way of teaching elementary reading. So this study that is called Advanced Readers, and I'm on slide 13, Advanced Readers in Reading First Classroom, Who Was Really Left Behind? Considerations for the Field of Gifted Education. And remember, this was during the NCLB era. And so the purposes were to assess the longitudinal growth of primary readers, gifted primary readers, as opposed to their more typical peers over a 3-year time frame, and then determine the degree to which these Reading First classrooms address the needs of these gifted readers, advanced readers. So when we're talking about longitudinal growth of a specific subject area, in this case reading, often basically we get achievement scores at various time points for groups of kids, right? And that's the quantitative part, right? And hopefully, the graph is going up. There's growth happening, there's learning happening. And but in order to understand why a particular growth curve looks a certain way, then you need to get more into the classrooms, talk to the people who are in the classrooms, talk to the people who are making decisions about what's happening in the classroom. So they also interviewed teachers, coaches, these were literacy coaches, and principals. So they used multi-level growth modeling, which is an advanced type of regression analysis. Okay, and that's how they got the plot of how much kids were growing. And they were basically looking at the curve, the graph of growth among gifted and typical kids. And then they did the interviews. So that's how, so what they found out was that the gifted kids, they flattened out. Their growth flattened out. And whereas the more typical kids, they had the curve was steeper. Okay, so you're looking at that as a researcher, and the question is why? And their qualitative findings showed that, okay, Reading First used basal readers. Those are when instead of reading like real storybooks like you would get from the library, it's a compendium where everybody in the class has this textbook that's their reader for reading time. And so these are kindergarten through third grade kids, I think. Kindergarten through second grade. And so strict adherence to the basal readers was defining how much program fidelity, how much teachers were sticking to the program, right? So you can imagine as this initiative is rolled out, the coaches and the principals are going to see, well, are you actually doing what you're supposed to do in the classroom if you're the teacher, right? Now, so the thing is that it limited opportunities for advanced readers, right? Because if everybody's reading the same textbook and a kid, is beyond that level, then they don't have opportunities to read at their level. So there wasn't there was a lack of fit between the readers and the basals, the textbooks and the gifted kids, and that resulted in a lack of challenge. And there wasn't differentiated instruction. So there was limited rigor for advanced readers. Okay, and so we saw these curves where the growth of the gifted kids goes flat, and the growth of the typical kids, keeps wait, how do I do my hands? Keeps climbing. And now we have an understanding of why. Okay, I'm going to pause right here, and this is to be continued. Okay, see you soon.